This is the Cinematography for Actors podcast.
More than a podcast, Cinematography for Actors is a vibrant community devoted to bridging the gap between talent and crew. Each week, our show offers transparent, insightful conversations with industry leaders. We unveil the magic behind the scenes, from candid discussions about unique filmmaking processes to in-depth technical exploration. Join us in unraveling the intricacies of filmmaking one episode at a time. It's more than just cameras and lenses. We aim to inspire, educate, and empower as we peel back the curtain on the art of effective storytelling. Now on to the episode.
Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Cinematography for Actors podcast. I am one of your three hosts today. We have a full room. I'm Indiana Underhill, DP side of Cinematography for Actors. We have Haley Royal.
Hi.
Hi. And we have Brianna Wing.
Hello.
Who are the actor side. And joining us today is Director of Photography, Alicia Robbins. Welcome. Hi.
Hello.
And just to kind of do a nice intro, I have this fantastic short bio I wanted to read out to give people some context before we dive into as much technical and practical information as possible. And so, DP Alicia Robbins holds the record for being the first female cinematographer to be a full-time DP on a Shondaland series. Congrats. We need like our little button that applauds. Yeah, Robbins was lead DP on Grey's Anatomy season 17 after also having shot season 16. She also lensed 4 of the 8 episodes for Bridgerton season 3 in London, which is still awaiting their much anticipated release date. I'm sure we have a lot of fans there for that, so they're excited. She shot half of the Netflix miniseries titled Keep Breathing, starring Melissa Barrera, which was released in July 2022. She has also been shooting episodes for the new NBC reboot of Quantum Leap Season 2, which is scheduled to release in October. Previously, Robbins lensed several features and numerous commercials, documentaries, and music videos. Baby Splitters, lensed by Robbins, won Best Feature at the 2020 Santa Barbara International Film Festival and Best Comedy Feature at the San Diego International Film Festival, and received mention in Variety for its sparkling cinematography. Whoa. Let's define sparkling later. The Wedding Invitation, also shot by Robbins, won Best Romantic Comedy at the Manhattan Film Festival and Best Comedy at Burbank International Film Festival in 2016. Welcome, Alicia.
Yay! Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, I think I always light up when I have another DP in the room because I'm just like, let's talk. But rather than me start this off, I would love to have Bree take the floor here, take the center stage, because Bree had written out a list of questions for me because she wanted to bring in me for some reason to talk with Haley and I. But instead, let's go to Alicia for some of those because I think they're really interesting and driven from the right place for CFA.
Yes, thank you. I would love to ask these questions because from an actor's perspective, there is prep that I don't know what you go into that I'm dying to know. For example, to start out, and you can differentiate between episodic and features if it's different. You sign on to a show, amazing, you're going to be the DP. What's the first thing that you do? What's the first email, the first phone call? Do you read the script first? You got the job. What is your next move?
That's a long answer. Well, here, I'll move this over so I can kind of look at you as well.
Okay, great.
Well, for me, feature prep is very different just because I only did independent film. So I can't really speak on how I would handle a feature now. I'm hoping that my next feature will be bigger than the ones that I shot before because now I'm shooting big TV. So television, because it's episodic and it's different for like streaming versus like weekly showings like NBC or ABC. So let's go to Grey's Anatomy, for instance. Well, when I got hired for that show, well, first of all, I wasn't hired on the full season right away. So I was hired to shoot a couple of episodes. So it was like a little bit of a trial run. So I didn't know that I was going into the full season yet. And there wasn't really a lot of prep going into that. It was more just like I had my interview with Debbie Allen. She was like, yes, please, we would love you to shoot these episodes. Let's get going. And then when the script finally came out, I got to read the script and we had already kind of been into prep at that point. So a lot of episodic TV, the script isn't out right when you start prep. You could be waiting for a script for a few days.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But you at least will know, okay, these are the locations. This is probably what the scenario is going to be. So you can at least start scouting. You can start kind of figuring out the tone that you want for these rooms or the locations, but you might not know exactly what the script is going to be, sometimes just days before you actually start to shoot. So so it's sometimes weird. You're like prepping without a script, but that happens a lot of time, especially when you're working on these big network shows where they're just cranking out the content every single week. You're waiting for scripts sometimes. Whereas like a show like Keep Breathing, for instance, we had all 6 scripts written basically right at the beginning. Well, they had the first 3 fully written, and then they had treatments for the last 3. So you kind of knew what was going to happen and what you needed to look for. And I shot the last 3 episodes of that miniseries. So it was weird because even though I was hired in at the very beginning, I wasn't prepping the scripts that had already been written. I was prepping for the next 3 that weren't quite complete. Yeah, there were still just treatments. But we got the scripts way in advance to me actually starting production on that. Yeah, so it was like, I mean, it was something like 6 weeks of prep for my 3 episodes, which is awesome because we needed it, because we needed to look at all these wooded locations up in Canada. And then for Bridgerton, which is also a whole other beast, I had 8 weeks of prep for my first 2 episodes. Wow. And those scripts were written. They were ready to go. And then we had 8 weeks of looking at locations, figuring out how we were going to shoot all these scenes. So it's very different between streaming. I think budget plays a lot into it too. And whether or not you're working on like an ABC or NBC show where it's like a weekly release. Mm-hmm. So
how do you know what lenses or what you need then if you're only getting a script 2 days before?
Well, on an episodic show, you usually have your base package that lives on the camera truck. Like you've decided before going into the show what your camera package is going to be, what your lens package is going to be. And so then when you're prepping, you decide on if you have specialty items. So it's not like re-prepping a whole camera package with new lenses. You're still working with what's already there. And then you might bring on a specialty lens because you want to do something funky here. Or you might bring like a funky gimbal because you got to get this crazy like handoff shot that's going to go through a window. And so that might be a device that you don't have on set. You're having to specially rent that. So for a TV show like Quantum Leap or Grey's Anatomy, they have their set lens and camera package. Now you can change up things as you start a new season. So like when I started, when I took over as the lead DP of Grey's Anatomy, we switched some things around because I had some time to like figure out whether or not I wanted to use the same filtration. We kept the cameras, we kept the lenses. I upped their resolution to at least be the 3.2K on the minis before they were shooting 1080, but we wanted the adjustability to have
for reframing.
Yeah, for reframing a little bit because it was the COVID year too. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of risk at, are we going to be able to do these 10-hour days and get the content shot? Yeah. So let's up the resolution. So if we do have to reframe later, we will. So there was a few little changes that we did. I did change the filter package.
We have some exciting news. CFA has teamed up with We Make Movies to get you a discount on production management services, including access to comprehensive production insurance and workers' comp for your next shoot. Visit wemakemovies.org/insurance and use code CFA23 on your intake form for 10% off your quote.
But that show had been going for 16 years at that time too, so they had pretty much a format of what it looked like. And then like Keep Breathing, because I was the second DP coming into that, John Joffin, who fantastic cinematographer, he shot the first 3 episodes, and so he was like, I think I want to shoot Sony Venice, and I'm a huge fan of the Supreme Primes, and so he picked that, and I was like, well, thank God, because I actually love both of those. So
we're good.
We're good. I don't need to change that up.
Yeah.
So I fell into a really nice camera package, lens package that he'd established. And I didn't really have to tweak that very much at all. I think I had some specialty things here and there, but for the most part, I stuck with what he'd established on those first 3 episodes.
And when you come in as a guest DP, do you bring in a whole new team and department too, or do you
no.
Okay.
So you're also working with the team that's already there. So like Grey's Anatomy, they've had their team on there for many, many years. Like there's some people that have been there since the very beginning. So you're getting to know these people that have been there for a very long time. And that's also tricky too, because sometimes some of them might have a certain way that they think something should be done. So like when you're trying to put your own stamp on it and trying to change things up a little bit, there could be pushback, but for the most part, at least on Grey's, they were really welcoming of me being there.
Yeah, wow.
That hasn't always been the case all over.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it seems like the crews that I've worked with have been very willing to adjust to what my style is and what I think is appropriate for the episodes I'm shooting.
So like there are always guest directors, different directors are changing, different DPs are changing per episode. What other, I'm now wondering, it's not like the production designer is changing.
Well, the DPs are usually alternating.
Oh, okay.
So the DP is one of the main people that's also, you're doing one episode off for prep and one episode on for shooting.
Okay.
For a typical rotating alternate
like
DP.
the first AD is usually the similar situation.
You stay with your
ADs
first AD.
swap.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll have 2 first AD so that you have one that's prepping and then that one that you're prepping with is also your AD on set. So that's like a traditional way of shooting episodic television is you're alternating back and forth like that.
Okay.
But almost every single time you're getting a different director. I mean, sometimes you might have your showrunner or your producing director will direct more episodes than other people. So you might get that person several times throughout a season. But a lot of times you'll get a director that maybe comes in for 1 or 2 episodes for the whole season of television. And then like with the streamers, a lot of that is block shooting. So block shooting is where you're doing more than 1 episode at a time so that you're not, because they don't have to worry about releasing a new episode every single week.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, let's be efficient here. Let's use this location.
All the bedroom stuff we'll do here. All the beach
for this
stuff we'll
whole
do there.
block,
Yeah.
let's get it all while we're here. So block shooting works really well with streaming networks because they are releasing when they want to. They're not abiding to a network schedule of having to get something out every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference? Do you like shooting more chronologically or do you prefer a block shoot?
I kind of like both of them. With the network on again, off again, where you're prepping and then shooting, I feel like you shoot for like 8 or 9 days and then you're prepping for like 8 or 9 days. So there's something very relaxing about that, knowing that you only have to tough it out for about 9 days and then you're getting a break again.
And then you get to prep.
Whereas like Bridgerton has massive blocks. So like our block shooting for 2 episodes, we have 20-day episodes, and so we shoot 2 of them. So it's 40 days.
20-day
of shooting.
episodes?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh my god.
And sometimes even more. So we had like
a full feature, like
Yeah.
independent feature amount of
Exactly.
time for one episode.
So you're prepping for the 8 or 6 to 8 weeks, and then you're shooting for 40, maybe more days to get the
Just get that
content. And so at the end of it, you're just like, oh my god,
So tired.
I'm so
How many
tired.
setups are you expecting to do on average for that type of shoot then?
So like Quantum Leap, we do a ton. We move so fast. And Grey's Anatomy was like that too. A lot of times we'd have 3 cameras. Sometimes we'd be cross shooting depending on what we had to get. It was more about page count and just getting through the work. But like on Quantum Leap, I think we'd get through something like 40 setups.
Oh my god.
Or something.
Oh my god.
Crazy. Whereas like Bridgerton is 14 to 15.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's so great.
You're
Yeah.
slowing down a lot more for that because you got to stylize everything. You got to make sure that everything looks beautiful and the movement is right. And yeah.
And who are you going through for budget approvals for the add-on gear, and how early on does that have to be submitted?
Yeah, I mean, usually going through our line producer or our main producer. And I try to give people a heads up as much as possible. Again, it's different with the block shooting versus episodic.
Right.
Like Quantum, it would be hard for me to get something in right away, because sometimes we didn't even have like a finished script yet.
Yeah.
They'd be like, do you have an idea of specialty gear that you might want? I'm like, no,
help me.
No material.
I haven't read the script yet. Give me 2 days.
Yeah.
2 days. And usually I have to discuss with like my gaffer or my key grip or someone and be like, I'm thinking of doing this. Is this something that you think we can achieve? And then I'm like, okay, I think that is something we can achieve. Let's ask for it.
Got it.
So I try to get a budget for like a Quantum Leap or Grey's Anatomy. And I'm not really budgeting it. It's more just asking.
For sure. Yeah,
That's one thing that's great about being a director of photography is you're not actually putting the cinematography budget together.
Yes.
Thank goodness. And that isn't the case
Independent,
for a lot of keys.
Independent is different, I think. Sometimes you're like there and you're like, where are my relationships?
my
like, what can I do? So that would be just like a breath of fresh air for me. I can't even imagine.
It is, because I did the same thing when I was doing independent features. I was breaking down all the budget for cinematography.
I do it for like even shorts or like music videos. I'm like, even equipment value, I'm like, oh, I need to get my equipment value below 500,000.
Yes.
Or like, 300,000 based off policies. Yeah. And so I'm just like hearing that. I'm like,
oh, it is such a breath of fresh air. So nice. Like, it was so cool getting to go into Bridgerton, and our producer called me, our line producer called me, and he was like, is there anything that you know that you're going to want? And I was like, well, honestly, yeah. I mean, I love the Scorpio 17 telescoping crane.
Fun.
And I like to have it full time. And he's like, oh, okay. Oh, all right, great. And I thought there was going to be way more of a discussion. And so when I got there and I finally talked to my key grip, he was like, yeah, so when we're working with a Scorpio, since it's on full time, and I was like, wait, what?
So we got approval?
It's here? We really have it? And he's like, oh, yeah, you asked for it, right?
There's no stress.
That's amazing. That was one of my questions is how do you budget for equipment? But let's take it back a little bit. First, we'll start with episodic, and then we'll go into independent. Can you talk about the conversation you are having with your line producer from the very beginning? Does the line producer have an idea of what the budget should be or could be based off experience? Or are you like, this is a ballpark number? And honestly, what are those numbers on shows like that?
So that's what's so tricky is that usually you do not know what the cinematography budget is.
And will they not tell you if you ask?
No.
I
have never been a part of any show, TV show, that has revealed what that budget is.
Wow.
Because they're always, they're taking from here to put over here, and it's a big puzzle for them. It's a Jenga pile.
Yeah.
So they don't want to say that you have a certain amount.
Because you don't want to spend all of it.
Right. Because all of a sudden you're calculating. You're like, well, why don't we have this? I thought that my budget was blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, but we had to pull from yours to pay for that build that we did.
Yeah.
So they don't
or
really...
a guest star maybe they want to bring in that they haven't locked yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So they never, and it's understandable that they don't reveal what that budget is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of just put wish lists out. That's what you usually start with. You'll start with like a wish list of these are the things that I really think that we could use that's going to help the show.
Yeah.
And then they start breaking down the budget, and then they'll come back and go, do you really need this techno crane or whatever? So you need this lens for this. Do you really need it? And I'm like, oh, well,
I
don't really need it.
But it would be
I
nice.
want it. Yeah. So you put the wish list together, and then they come back, and then it's just a matter of like discussing, okay, well, what if I got rid of this? Could I keep this? Because you'll know, you as the DP will know what's more important to have. They don't know that. Like the producers don't.
They're trusting you on your context.
Yeah, they don't know that weird squishy lens is actually more important than the crane.
Totally.
Because you're trying to get like some funky style for a scene.
For every time this character comes on, they have that squishy lens.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they might be like a squishy lens. Well, you can have the crane, but not the squishy lens. It's like, actually, can I trade? I'd rather have the squishy lens than not the
Yeah, exactly. And then they're like, oh, that saved us thousands of dollars.
Sure,
okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Hey guys, what's a squishy lens?
Great question.
It's like, well, do they even make them anymore? How do they use a squishy and so
they do. They're like different now.
Yeah.
Like, so there's a few different types. From my use of them, there's a few different types where you can pretty much like the cheap ones you can literally squish in and change how you want it to do, and you can rig it so it's always looking on the left side or always on the right, and then you have like different aberrations and kind of like out of focus elements happening that you normally wouldn't.
Have you ever used
like
a lens baby?
Goes
Yeah,
like
exactly.
this?
Do you know what a lens baby
It looks
is?
like an accordion.
Yeah.
The lens babies.
Okay.
That's like the cheapest version.
Yeah,
of
that's a
squishy
very
lens.
cheap version.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because the squishy lens was actually remote controlled too, right? Like you can actually
change like your pan and tilt of the lens itself.
It's a very funky look.
Yeah.
It's very dreamy. It's very surreal.
Yeah.
All right.
And you can have different. You can make it really extreme or kind of subtle.
Yeah.
And so it just gives you like everything more control over like kind of, and you're embedding that effect.
Yes,
in your
you're
image.
baking it in. Whereas like a lot of people will be doing that kind of stuff in VFX now.
Yeah.
But this is a way that a DP could kind of bake in a funky look.
Yes.
Okay.
And being like, this is how we're telling that character's story or this environment or that drunk scene or this, dreamy scene. And so speaking about kind of embedding a look, this is kind of a little off topic of embedding the look, but the high sensitivity camera thing that you're communicating with actors. We talked a little bit about this when we ran into each other at the Lights event.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about that relationship between actor and DP and trust in regard to the high sensitivity camera?
Yeah. Well, because it's a new thing.
Yeah.
It's so new because all these cameras that are coming out, they're up to like 3,500 ISO. So basically that means that the camera is way more sensitive in the dark. Like they literally can see in the dark. Sometimes a street light is blowing out like it's the sun because it's just too bright.
Yeah.
So these and the grain quality is lovely. So you can shoot at these 3,500 ASAs or 2,500 ASAs and it looks gorgeous. So you really don't need as much light. But this is a shift to what actors are used to. I mean, there's so many actors that are used to having like their big soft source.
They see their key.
They see they're blinded almost.
Yeah,
by
because they've gotten used to that for so many years. And then all of a sudden you've got these actors that are walking onto the set that feels really, really dark.
Yeah.
And they're going, how can you even see me?
Yeah.
Can you?
Are you going to see that moment? Like, can you pick that up?
Yeah, like all this work I'm doing, do I even need to do this work?
Yeah, why bother if you can't even see me on camera? And especially when you're working with a diverse cast, too, that's even more troublesome because then you get people of darker skin tones that are very worried, rightfully so, when they're stepping onto your set that, like, are you going to be able to see me?
Like, are you not paying attention to the fact that I have a darker complexion?
About, and I totally understand that. I would be fearful of that too.
Yes.
And so it's a matter of understanding. And so I've had to do this in the past where I had to explain I'm using a very high sensitive camera and I'm shooting at a really high sensitive level. I want to be like, oh, I'm shooting at high ISO.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very sensitive in the dark, and so I can light at lower levels. And I've got your back. I see you. You look amazing. It's gonna be lower light than probably what you're used to.
Yeah.
So it's that education factor that isn't really talked about very much
it's not
at all
until cinematography for actors came along.
Yay!
But the context around it is something that we're always promoting. It's just like the context around whether it be understanding eye line, eye light, how to work with an operator, or lens swaps and what that means. Do you preserve that emotion for the wide, or do you want to like go in for only the close up for that? So it's like, and this is another thing, like we talked about before we started recording, we talked a little bit about virtual production and the context around that necessary for even DPs. This is just another reason why context is so key to telling a story creatively, especially for talent.
Yeah, and on set, I mean, when you're shooting, you don't have time to go into like, ISO is this, and this is what this is. You don't have time to educate an actor on it, but you do have time to communicate and let them know, like, don't worry, I got you. You look good. This is what it
Trust
looks
me.
like.
And you hope that they do trust that. And that's where it's tricky, too, especially for me, because, I mean, I have been shooting for 20 years.
Yeah.
But I didn't really break into bigger television until 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so to everyone else, I'm a newcomer into the scene. And of course, there isn't that level of trust yet. I haven't shot the biggest stuff out there for many, many years.
Right.
So coming in as a new DP and new to the show, it's always like, does this person actually know what they're doing?
Right.
Am I going to look okay on camera? So you hope
learning
that
curve.
after a while, if they're watching any, or if they're looking at any stills at all, like they don't actually see dailies. I don't think
I don't think so. Unless they're a producer on it, I think.
If they're a producer, absolutely. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure
if you got a big name, you can like
you probably
demand
ask for it,
or ask for it, but generally not.
Because I could see that being pretty tough.
Let's talk about a little bit about the virtual production side of stuff, because I found that conversation really interesting as a DP because I just came off of my first virtual production shoot that Bree produced, and it was a great experience, and I feel a lot more confident speaking about it now and also understanding my needs as a DP. But one of the things we always talk about, and we talked a bit about it with setups and timing, is, and you brought up the pacing of virtual production and how true it is that you could be a really fast DP and know what you want and know how you like to light and what this story requires, but it really is up to a different set of eyes and team in order to make sure that that gets on your screen and is the way you like it and has your lighting style and all of that. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about virtual production being the new hype word, or
because it really is kind of the new hype word, and I think that's what we said too. Is like when the Red came out, all the producers were like, "We're gonna shoot this on the Red." And you're like,
"Why? Why am I doing this right now?" Why are you telling me my camera? Like, what is this?
Why? And so I feel like a lot of that's been happening lately too, where they're like, "Oh, and we're gonna do it all virtual production," and you read the script and you go, "Oh, why?"
It's like cheaper to build a house or shoot a house. That's what one of the things we were talking about was like. It's great for the stuff that might have been harder to do, like on a mountain or on a pirate ship or safety issues or things like where I'm creating an entire new world. I'm in space. I'm on a planet. But when you're shooting in a house, which is one of the things we did, it was really interesting to learn about depth of field is a whole other thing in this world. And also understanding the amount of texture and depth you can create is limited based off of the size of your screen, the distance and proximity to the lens of talent, to wall and us. And so it's a really interesting way of having to view the world and sell it as a DP.
I think it's always dangerous to say, we're going to do this whole thing virtual production. I mean, unless you are shooting a Star Wars or something like that, which even they don't do all virtual production. So they did build a lot of their sets too. But it's dangerous to say, let's just do the whole thing virtual production. I mean, for a short, it kind of makes sense though, because you don't necessarily want to change locations.
Company moves and stuff.
But if you're doing like a feature or long run TV show, it might be easier that while you're working on that volume stage, there's a set being built on another stage, like a practical house or a practical hospital set or something like that. And that way too, you do, I feel like I see the pacing when you're watching something that's shot on a virtual stage versus practically. Like you can tell that there was so much thought that went into every single frame. And then they're holding the frame way longer.
Because they're like showing it off.
They're showing it off. Like, look what I did.
And they can't get all the coverage because they don't have the time to adjust for those angles. And so they're like living in this different style.
Which is cool. I mean, I like it. It's very theatrical, honestly. But it does slow everything down. So if there's like a blend of practical locations and virtual sets for those sets, like you said, that are really hard to get, either because of the location that it's in or it's a foreign world. Then I feel like that adds variety to the piece too.
I also learned, so I really loved, I mean, I know it depends, but I love shooting around a 4.56 and I couldn't.
Oh, you couldn't? No, you can't.
You can't.
No.
And you can't be on wide lenses.
No.
So I was like, and it's not like I want to shoot on wide lenses all the time. It was just more like, here's my range, and the VP team were like, you can't have those two focal lengths. It's not going to sell.
It was a smaller LED wall too?
Well, it had more of an arc on it.
And so you feel the...
So you can see those panels if you are shooting in that direction. And you can also, the moire and the highlights can be a nightmare. So not only did I have to shoot wide open at a 2.2, which is kind of my nightmare to shoot an entire thing at a 2.2, but I had to have BPM in to help, which is black promise, which is filtration to help diffuse and soften. But then I also had to shoot a lot on long lenses and seeing my stills. Like,
so long lenses still at the 2.2?
Yeah. 2.2 on a 30, I was anamorphic, so 2.2 on a 35 anamorphic is like, half that in.
Is the reason you can't shoot on a wide lens because of the curve on the panels?
It's how big your stage is, the curve, and also your depth of field changes based off of how long your lens is.
Right.
Like
and
relative depth of field.
It's all a flat thing.
Yeah, well, it's curved, but it's.
I mean, like between objects in the back, like everything's flat.
Well,
like
it's a curved stage,
the bigger the
but yes,
screen
it's
too,
flat.
the wider you can go.
The wider you can go, but even then you have to watch what your wide open is because you need to be able to believably separate the background from talent.
Yeah.
And the talent also has to be an X amount of feet away from the wall and your props as well. And you don't want this wall to illuminate your props or your talent.
Yeah.
And you can't add ambience to help with depth because that'll get illuminated by the wall.
Yeah.
And so as a DP, you're like learning this whole new language. And as producers are adopting it, and I'm sure they're probably going to adopt it more and more for episodic and streaming because people, until they learn that it doesn't actually speed really, things up, it's like, it's nice that your A-list talent can be held in a specific area and show up to set every day in Hollywood and like, or on a stage in New Mexico, and they're there every day and they're not going to multiple locations. Yeah. But it's just like a whole other world of shooting as a DP and you're more working with the limitations than the freedom.
I'm going to ask this question.
Yeah.
And I'm nervous to say it out loud.
No, never.
I get headaches when I stare at my computer all day long. Has anybody run into that? We know of issues of being in front of an LED wall that's giant for 12 hours a day.
I guess we'll find out about 10
We're
all gonna get seizures.
Totally.
Is anybody nausea,
I even had to
headaches?
It was almost like when I was shooting this, it was like I felt like how colorists have to readjust by going outside.
Right.
So like in between like setups, I'd have to just go outside for 3 minutes and be like, the sun exists, it's here. Because you're so like particular about analyzing, oh, that clock has to be lit without specular highlights. Oh, like that seashell prop on the shelf needs to be brought down. And then like, how am I lighting to match it so it looks believable? That you're so, I think it's more like you're so zoned in on every precise decision you're making. That gave me the headache. Yeah. But your husband...
It's like you're doing graphic design instead of painting with watercolors.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, they both have their reasons for doing it, but one is precision-based and one is a little bit more fluid and by feel. Yeah. And I feel like that...
And you're having to change, like, the type of lighting you have because you can't have that cast on the back that would blow out, like, lift your shadows on the wall and stuff. But speaking of LED World... your husband owns a car stage.
Yeah, it's called the Car Stage. So he has one in New York.
I have his business card, by the way.
You probably
have met him.
Did we run into him?
We have met him at NAB. We met him at NAB. I believe, or Cinegear. I think it was NAB. Because does he work with Lewis Communications sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've met your husband, and we talked about like doing some courses maybe in the New York stuff.
Absolutely.
But
they'll have funny. One here in LA too.
That's so great.
Yeah.
All right.
So that would be the place to do courses.
Maybe we could pair up with you and do some.
Yeah, that would be really fun.
So fun.
That'd be really cool. But because for LED car work.
Yes.
Hands
fantastic.
Down, that
reflections
is the way I like
and like
to
wrapping
do car work. Absolutely. Because I've been on a process trailer way too many times.
Right.
And I'm still doing process trailer. This was so funny. It's like, how am I on a process trailer?
We can do this already.
Why? Community members, join the newsletter to see this actually happen in
our workshops, everyone.
Exactly.
What is so when working with talent on LED, like the car stage or volumes, things like that, what are some of the biggest lessons you're having to communicate or have them understand or even producers understand?
Let's see. I mean, again, it takes time, but the thing is, I don't think it takes more time than when you're doing a process trailer anyway. So for that process, I do think LED speeds it up. Yeah. Like you can get through a bunch of angles on a car stage.
You're not having to reset?
Yeah. You're not resetting or even dealing with weather. Like the last time I used a process trailer, it kept on raining like intermittently. And we're trying to decide, okay, do we want water on the windshield or not?
Yeah. And you're like, yes, a wet down looks good, but not on the car.
Exactly. So it was like trying to keep that consistent was really hard. Yeah. I mean, I know the actors generally love it because they're not being pulled around and it still feels
they're not
real.
Driving around behind something.
Yeah, and they're getting to see the interaction of where they are in the place. So it's like it feels real enough. It's not just green screen where they're having to pretend. So I'm trying to think like conversation. Usually the producers like it. Sometimes they encourage us to do LED. Most of the time we end up on a process trailer because of scheduling conflicts.
Got it.
So it'll be like we're already out at this location. We don't have enough to fill the day. what can we pop in there? We have one little 1-page driving scene. Okay, well, can we use that road that's outside of the ranch?
Right.
To get that 1-page driving scene, then it's like, oh,
yeah,
I guess so. Process trailer.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, well, yeah, but that's how it fits into the schedule.
Yeah.
So
for the episodic stuff, talking about like Bridgerton versus Grey's and the way that you're lighting or the creative choices you have with the streaming shows or the streamers, what level are you able to be creative and on like something like Bridgerton? And who is that having to be approved by to that, if you're going to that extent?
Yes, because like on Grey's, it was approved by our producing director for the most part and showrunner. Okay. Like they would talk about it if I wanted to change a style. And I did change the style of season 17 because it was the COVID year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we wanted it to look different. And that was a whole discussion of like, does this fit with what we want to do and blah, blah. Bridgerton, there were some tweaks that I wanted to make to season 3 based on what the content was. And so I did lighting tests, of course, and ran that through our post-production, did a timing on it and everything, and then had the showrunner look at it and be like, this is what I'm thinking for this particular scene. Does this work for you?
We'll have to get you in when Bridgerton season 3 comes out to talk about those lighting tests and what that means, because I know that it's not very accessible for everyone to do. They do their own versions of lighting tests and camera tests, but not for an approval. It's more for like, I haven't used this panel before, or I haven't used these lenses. Let's check it out. But on a scale like that, it is very much selling yourself again and your pitch to a variety of people who have to be on board. And so it'll be really interesting to get you back in for that. Because I think even for talent, you're testing them in the light as well,
I was testing our stand-ins.
Got it.
Yeah, the talent wasn't available for the test, but I was testing our stand-ins.
Yes.
And our stand-ins look great. So
cool. Great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that again once it comes out. Once we know when it's going to come out.
I know, exactly. No, hopefully soon. Yeah.
We talked about how you aren't given a budget on Episodic, but for independent features, are you given a budget, or do you break down the script yourself and say, I need this?
I ask for what the total budget of the film is on an independent feature, because I want to know what we're working with.
And they'll tell you usually?
I insist upon it. Like if they're just like, oh, we're shooting between 200,000 and 500,000. It's like, yeah, but that is really vague. And so is my camera budget 20 grand, or is it 50, or is it half of that? Like, I need to know. So I would say, okay, but what is my cinematography budget? And when I say cinematography budget, I mean camera gear, all the lighting grip gear, as well as the crew that I would be hiring. So whatever encompasses cinematography. And then they would tell me the budget, because we'd be like, I need to know what I'm working with. And from there, I would decide, okay, how do I want to compromise maybe this gear so I can have this person? Or maybe I back off on how many crew members I want, so that I can have this kind of gear and do these kind of camera moves because I want a dolly or I want a crane and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, we are stoked to shout out our audio sponsor, Deity Microphones. Their S-Mic 2 Pro shotgun mics have impeccable sound clarity, directionality, headphone monitoring, and a user-friendly design. And we're proud to launch our studio with them. Our goal is to bring you educational gems every episode, and with these mics, you can listen to the best quality audio possible wherever you are. To learn more about using Deity mics for your own podcasting, voiceover, or filming needs, go to deitymic.com.
And most of my independent movies that I've shot, I always try to do it with the least amount of people possible. So have like 2 people in G&E, and then like maybe 2 or 3 people in camera, and sometimes even less than that.
Wow, and you yourself are sitting down doing the line item budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would do a line item budget, and then I would give that to our line producer, and they would take a look at it and see if that fit with their budget. And especially if I was getting like really tight, it'd be like, I can't work with $30,000 for a 20-day shoot, whatever it is. It's like, it's impossible. That means I have 2 people on my crew. So sometimes we'd have to adjust a little bit, or I'd be like, okay, well, we're not shooting on an Airy. We're going to shoot on something that we can either get donated or
something
very low rental.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about relationships with vendors because as DPs, that's such a huge thing. From you've been shooting for 20 years, from the independent world for features transitioning into larger shows. How has your relationship with vendors changed? Have you been able to stay loyal? Would you like to stay more loyal? Like, how does that work out with the amount of pull you have?
Well, it's so crazy because I didn't really have a lot of relationships with vendors at all when I was doing my independent work.
Okay, cool.
Because I ended up just owning my gear.
Got it.
So I would buy the gear and then rent that back to production or not, depending on the budget. I was so painful about it.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of lighting gear.
Nice.
I mean, not a ton, but just enough to
get by.
Yeah, to get by on a feature. And then I might need to rent like a 1-ton grip package from Wooden Nickel.
Yes.
Like Wooden Nickel was
God
actually
bless
my
Wooden
God
Nickel.
bless Wooden Nickel. They were absolutely my go-to. They're still my go-to. Like if I need like a small little thing, I'm like, oh shit, I need to get this thing for this weekend.
Yes.
I still go to them.
They are so great and so flexible and have some stuff.
I did have like relationships with like Mole Richardson.
Yeah. For sure.
Mole Richardson had helped us out so much at AFI and so I kept in touch with them. But then it was like once I got into the bigger stuff, a lot of like Grey's Anatomy already had their established relationships. But luckily, they're like Otto Nimmons has been a vendor now for me for several shows.
They're so great.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Chris is so cool too.
Yeah, and
it's one of those people you just want to hang around.
So I've now done 3 shows with Otto.
Oh,
so,
great.
yeah, and that was because the show I was on was like we used Otto Nimmons. I was like, oh, great, okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's a great house. I love going there.
Yeah.
But then like the foreign stuff, like going to Vancouver, I didn't know vendors up there anyway, and so the producers that already had that in place. Also, the DP who shot the first 3 episodes, he's Canadian, so he knew who he wanted to go through. That was Keslow camera that we used up there.
Cool.
I should remember what lighting. Probably William H. White. Yeah. Like they provided all the camera. I mean the lighting gear.
Yeah.
And then London, a whole different thing there too. So again, they had their relationships that they used before. So it's like, okay, you just kind of trust.
That's great.
Yeah.
And as long as they have what you need, you're
exactly
good.
Yeah.
And
they did.
Do you get a lot of vendors now kind of coming to you being like, can you come to this demo of these new panels? Can you come test out this new gear?
Like, not necessarily even the houses, but the individual companies themselves.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah.
Like I have a good relationship with company Rotolite. They're actually out of England
I know
as well.
Rotolite.
Yeah. So I have a really good relationship with them. They've sent me demo units. I actually had quite a few demo units on Bridgerton.
Cool.
That's one thing that I'm going to want to show off at some point is how I use these specific lights and how I modified them for the show.
Great.
And oh my God, it saved my butt.
Cool. Oh, cool.
It saved my butt. So I'll be able to show some like samples of where you see this light effect.
I just used the Sumo Sky for the first time.
Oh, okay.
Which is like multiple, are you familiar with Sumo lights? They have this thing called Sumo Sky and it is a electronic LED strips that you can mount to a truss or you can mount to Roadrunner crank stands and go up on. Yeah. And you can make them as big or as small as you want with as much density or not like less dense.
It sounds kind of like what we're using in London called Aquabats.
Oh, cool. I don't even know what that is. This is what it's like to be a DP is you're just kind of like, I know about this. I don't know about anything else, but I know about this. Yeah.
There's so many lights out there.
And you're like, is that going to give me the effect I need? Great. I don't need to look otherwise. Yeah. You're just exhausted and you just want to shoot something.
How's the color temperature? Can I dim it way down? That's a new one too with this whole like high ISO thing.
Yeah.
You got to be able to dim your lights way down to like 0.5%.
I was about to say, are you in like the 0 point?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm in the 0.5, sometimes just 1% on these units.
And it's no wonder actors are coming to you being like, I can't see anything myself. And you're like, I'm sorry.
I see you perfectly.
You look great.
Like,
I can see that there is the hair out of place.
Don't trip.
Yeah, exactly. Wow,
there's a stool right there.
That is so interesting. What is coming out soon? You have Bridgerton, and you have probably some other stuff in the works.
Quantum Leap is airing in October.
Cool.
I did 2 episodes of the first half of this new season.
Amazing.
And then, but we're in the middle of that season right now, so there's supposed to be, I think, like 8 more episodes.
Wow.
The strike.
So you gotta wait.
Happened.
You're going back later.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, you will be. You will be. So what we'll have to do is, as things release, we'll have to get you back in to start to talk about the relationships on set, as well as kind of your choices, because I think for a lot of people, especially like me as a DP or for actors, they don't know what to expect when they're jumping or making that transition, that leap. And so it's really great that you had to go through that.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're probably going to be learning a lot from that transition.
Well, luckily my transition was a soft transition, which was really nice, because I got to be the C camera operator / additional DP on a Shondaland show. It's called For the People. So I was doing C camera full time. And then when the main DP had to go on tech scouts or we had double days, I would bump up and shoot those days. So it was like a soft transition into big TV.
How you deal with your gaffer and operators and producers.
And luckily everyone on that show was so nice.
So great.
Like there was a lot of things about the dolly that I didn't quite understand. Because I didn't get to work with nice Chapmans and Fishers all the time. So, and that our main dolly grip, he was just like, if you have questions about anything, just ask me.
Great.
It's fine. I'm like, okay,
so great.
What's that weird little thing that you keep attaching?
What is an RO? Why do you keep talking about it?
Exactly. What's RO?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so they were really kind at just trying to help me out and stuff. And then by the end of that season, I was shooting quite a few days because we had so many double days, and my DP had to do a lot of scouting and stuff. So I was shooting like 3 days of each episode, essentially. And then that was my connection with Shondaland. And so Grey's Anatomy was like, I hear you have a DP over there that you guys like, and we're looking
so
for.
Nice.
Wow.
We have to wrap things up, unfortunately. The final thing I kind of wanted to talk about was mentorship in this industry and how important it is on both sides, mentee and mentor.
Yes.
So from your experience, because I know from mine, I'm just so thankful and always surprised when people are willing to help me out or to like give me guidance or, let me shadow them. And I'm finding now that on the very low tier, people are coming to me to be like, hey, how did you do that? Or hey, what would you recommend I do? Why we were on set for this virtual production thing. And they're like, hey, why did you add black there? Or why are you bringing it in for the close up?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be consistent with the wide?
Oh,
things like that. And it's such a wonderful feeling. And you're like, people help me and I want to help them. What has your experience been like on both sides?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't had mentorship. So, I mean, essentially that first Shondaland show, because Christian Sebald brought me on, and he was very much a mentor on that. And he trusted me and showed me how he was pre-lighting sets and everything. So I definitely thought of him as a mentor. And since then, too, I was like, I always have to turn this back around and find people that are trying to get that foot in the door. Because I had already been shooting for 16 years.
Totally.
And it was just so hard to finally get that foot in the door. It was like, I know I can do this. It's just a matter of getting that chance. And so I always, if I have any control over it at all, I'm always trying to find a C camera operator that is looking to bump up to DP that is skilled and they just haven't had that chance yet. So I'm always seeing if I can find that. And that did happen on Grey's Anatomy. I was able to bring in a C camera operator that I knew was a DP, and she shoots Grey's now. So it's like,
oh my
gosh.
that.
Yeah. I love to hear that. That's amazing.
She shoots Grey's.
I love that opportunity and the power that has to just, because it's a tough industry that we work in, no matter if we're DPs or actors or directors, producers, it's a tough industry. And so having your network and community around you is such a vital part of the process in growing in this industry. And so it's so wonderful to hear that, and also the technical around C-cam operator, and hearing kind of the legitimate, this is where
and it's so funny because people don't think that, the C camera operator is the one that's going to be the DP. And it's like, but that makes more sense to me because you need your A camera operator to stay on the camera.
Right.
So it's easier to drop the third camera and have that person step up to DP for that day so that A and B can stay consistent. So, and I learned that from being the C cam op on that first Shonda Rhimes show.
Alicia, thank you so much for coming in. It was so great to pick your brain in this hot room. You can find Alicia on her Instagram, Alicia Camchick, which is really fun. It will be linked below. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time, everyone. Goodbye.
Join us in bridging the gap between talent and crew. Start by subscribing on your preferred podcast platform, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on vendor discounts, community events, and new podcast releases, and educate yourself through our free course releases on YouTube. It all starts at cinematographyforactors.com. And if you like this episode, consider leaving a review to make it easier for other listeners to find us.